I should also talk, as my colleague just has, about the federal budget, the one that's been budget resolution that's been prepared for our consideration as a result of the conference that's occurred between the House and Senate. This administration didn't inherit a day at the beach. They've inherited a tough situation. We, as a country, have been around, I guess, sort of officially since 1787. If you go from 1787 to 2001, that's about, I think it's about 214 years. And we ran up in that period of time roughly $5 trillion worth of debt. We essentially doubled that over the last 8 years. We doubled it. In just 8 years, we ran up as much new debt in the last 8 years as we did in our first 214 years as a nation. And I didn't hear nearly the kind of bemoaning and wailing about the growth in the deficit and the national debt during those 8 years as we hear from it today from our friends on the other side of the aisle. I think my colleagues know I'm not a real partisan guy, but I feel like it's important to say, this is the hand we've been dealt. It's the hand this administration's been dealt. The question is, what do we do about it? And we have a couple of wars we're fighting. We have an economy that's the worst since the Great Depression. And we have to do something about it. And one of the first things they decided to do about it is to try to jolt the economy back to life. I remember these old Frankenstein movies where you have the Dr. Frankenstein in the lab and trying to put the electrodes to the monster and bring the monster back to life, jolt that monster back to life. Well, we're trying to jolt not a monster back to life, we're trying to jolt our economy back to life. And economists of all sides, liberal, conservative, and everything in between have said, you got to spend a lot of money. And hopefully money that's largely used to produce jobs that'll add to value for good public purpose in our country. That's what we've done with the stimulus package. But as we go through this year and probably the next year or so, the deficit's going to be a whole lot bigger than certainly I'm comfortable with. I was elected to the House, served there for 10 years before I became governor of Delaware, and I was a deficit hawk. And in my heart, I still am. And what I want to do today is to talk about some things that we can do, ought to do, in some cases are doing, to bring the deficit down further. I'm encouraged when I hear our new president say that the deficit's large this year, but his goal over the next 4 years to reduce the deficit in half. I think that's fine. The important thing is we don't just stop there. And if there's another 4 years in this administration or a new administration, it's important that we continue to make progress and drive the deficit back closer to zero. I'm one of those people who thinks it's appropriate to deficit spend when we're in time of economic calamity, when we're in time of war, and as it turns out right now, we're in both. And hopefully 4 years from now, hopefully sooner than that, we won't be in both, and we can trim back our spending. I think when the economy is sound, we're not in a national disaster, a national war in other places around the world, I think it's appropriate to balance our budget. In fact, one of the things I was proudest of as governor is we not only balanced our budget for 8 years in a row, we reduced taxes for 7 years, and we actually paid down our debt a little bit, which made me very proud, and I know our legislature too. Hopefully, we'll be in a position in the years to come, much as we were in 1999 and 2000, in the last administration, actually pay down some debt while balancing the budget. I've suggested to the administration a whole bunch of things that we can do, and I've talked about them here on the floor to reduce the deficit. I want to talk at length about one of them, but I want to just mention the others as well. In order to better match revenues and expenditures going forward, we obviously cannot avoid the question of taxes. But as far as I'm concerned, before we start raising a lot of taxes, the first thing, maybe the better thing for us to do is to collect the taxes that are owed. And every year we hear about a tax gap. The last one was actually officially done, I think, about 8 or 9 years ago by the IRS, and they figured out that at the time we had a tax gap, money's owed to the Treasury, not being collected by the Treasury, about $300 billion a year. But most estimates I hear today, it's maybe $400 billion a year. And if we could only recover half of that, or a third of that, we're talking about real money that would make a real dent on our deficit. We make a lot of improper payments in this government of ours. I chair a subcommittee that has jurisdiction over that sort of thing, and we know that our improper payments that we made in the federal government last year were right around $72 billion. Mostly overpayments, some underpayments. And we need to do a better job. At least we know now, for the most part, where the improper payments are going, or at least the departments that are making them. But we're not doing a very good job of actually going back after we made an overpayment, especially, and recovering the money, recapturing that money. We call it post-audit cost recoveries, and we're just beginning to scratch the surface in one of our big entitlement programs, Medicare. And the Medicare program, we started about 3 years ago, hired some private firms and said, go out and monies that we've overpaid to providers or medical suppliers, equipment suppliers, let's go back and get the money that we've overpaid. We said we're going to do it in 3 states, California, Texas, Florida. First year of this effort, we recovered almost nothing. Second year, we recovered a little bit. And last year, we recovered about $700 million. That's real money. And the idea is not to just do it in 3 states, but why we do that in all 50 states, and I'm encouraged that we're going to do that. And if we can recover that kind of money in overpayments for Medicare, my guess is we could probably recover some money in Medicaid. And if we have two of our 3 big programs, entitlement programs, that are sucking up a lot of money, one of the first issues that we should face there is reducing the overpayments and going after the money and recovering that which we have spent, or in some cases misspent. Third area that we need to focus on is the area of major weapon systems, spending a lot of money. If you go back to, I think it was 2000, we're overspending in major weapon system cost overruns about $50 billion in 2000. By 2005, we're up to about $200 billion. Last year, we're up to close to $300 billion in major weapon system cost overruns. Clearly, that's an area that we can do better, got to do better. One of the things that I'd also mention is the president has, most governors have what we call line item veto power. The ability to go and line out a single line item in a budget. They have it by virtue of the Constitution, so they can veto bills, they can go through lines of their bills and veto lines and different pieces of the spending packages that they've signed into law. And we have something like that in the federal government. It's called rescission power. And the president can sign an appropriation bill into law, submit that to the Congress, and the Congress can vote it up or down, but if we don't do anything, then it kind of goes away. And the president sends rescission messages to us from time to time, and we don't do anything, and the rescission, the proposal, really sort of goes away. And what a number of us have done, 21 of us have done, have co-sponsored legislation that we introduced this week, Democrats and Republicans. And the idea behind the legislation is when the president signs a spending bill, not a tax bill, not a revenue bill, not an entitlement measure, but when he or she signs an appropriations bill into law, that he would have or she would have the right to send us a rescission message to propose to reduce or rescind spending in that spending bill. We would constrain how much the president could rescind. If programs were authorized, could rescind them more than 25%. If they're unauthorized, there's no such limit. The long and short of it, though, the president would send a rescission message, and we'd have to vote on it. We could vote it down with a simple majority. In the Senate, 51 votes, or in the House with 218. Not a 2/3 override, not both houses, just a simple majority in either the House or the Senate. We limit the time for this to occur. In fact, we limit the amount of years that this can be law to 4 years. 4 years. I call it a 4-year test drive with enhanced rescission powers for a president. If the president abuses it, the president should say to the presiding officer from Mexico, unless you vote for my top priorities here, I'm going to go after your top priorities. And we'll make sure that they don't become law and submit rescissions to try to intimidate a member of the Senate or a member of the House. That could happen. And as a result, we provide for this 4-year sunset. After that, this law goes away. If presidents, current or future, abuse this, they're not going to continue to enjoy this particular power. Do I think this will balance the budget? No, I don't. Do I think it might be of some help? Yes, I do. With respect to earmarks, among the things that we've done here is, and there's nothing inherently wrong with earmarks, directed spending, but when they're growing like topsy, as they were for a while, that's not a good thing. We've now decided to limit earmarks to 1% of revenue, which I think is appropriate. The second thing, we didn't know for the longest time where earmarks were coming from. Who was asking for an earmark? And we didn't know necessarily who was going to benefit from the earmark. And we've addressed that so that we know both. Another thing that we've addressed, and I believe we've addressed, is the idea I call them airdrops, where you have a conference committee with the House, a conference committee with the Senate on appropriations bills. You don't have an earmark in either one, and yet out of the conference committee emerges an earmark for somebody, and we don't know where it came from, and it was not in either bill. That shouldn't be allowed. And the last thing I'd mention is at the end of the day, having the ability for the president to look through a bill, whether earmarks or other forms of spending, and actually to say, maybe this is a bad idea. This is an egregious form of spending that should be addressed. And basically say to us in the Senate or the House, I've signed this bill into law. but I want you to come back and vote on a couple of these specific items. And I've always said, if I can't get 50 of my colleagues to vote for an earmark spending request that I've made on behalf of Delaware, if I can't get 50 of my colleagues to vote for it, I shouldn't probably be asking for that earmark in the first place. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, long and short of it. A lot of things that we can do, we continue to make progress, and I know we're on our way to getting down to about 3% of GDP by the end of the next 4 years after this 4 years. And I applaud that. There's some other things that we want to do. I look forward to working with our chairman of the Budget Committee.